We have breaking news from the ACC, the conference announcing it is going to play a 10-game conference schedule, and Notre Dame is going to be included. The Fighting Irish will play 10 ACC games like everybody else, and they will have an opportunity to win the ACC championship game, which will take place either December 12th or December 19th. There will not be two separate divisions. It's one division, and the two highest winning percentages will face off in the championship game. Interesting note on a non-conference game. As of right now, not all schools have a non-conference game scheduled. You're allowed one non-conference game, but it must be played in your state. So it has to be basically a home game if you are playing a non-conference game. So we have a lot to sort out. Thankfully, we have Dennis Dodd, who's been all over this story from the get-go. Dennis, this is very different than anything we've seen before, different from what the Big Ten and Pac-12 are doing. Notre Dame is effectively, for at least a year, a member of the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest news to come out of this. The 10+1 model was largely speculated for the ACC. I wrote about it last week. But Notre Dame has gone all in for the first time in their 132-year history, are playing in a conference for a conference championship. Now, the ACC went from 8 conference games to 10 conference games, 5 home, 5 away. This does preserve the Clemson-Notre Dame game, which right now is on the calendar for November. None of the dates on this spreadsheet right now are listed. I don't know if the league knows when it's going to start. It was speculated to be September 19th or September 26th. And to play this conference championship game, as you said, December 12th or December 19th. So all that's up in the air. You could have anywhere from a 12 to 14-week season for the ACC here. But, I guess the talk now is this a precursor for Notre Dame joining the league, or is it a one-off? I think the most interesting part of this, Chris, is that you've got a possibility of Notre Dame and Clemson, a big possibility of Notre Dame and Clemson playing twice within a couple of weeks. Once in the regular season and then in the conference championship game. That would be very, very interesting. I thought, for one, that would be a deal breaker for Notre Dame. And
I'm right in reading the release from the ACC that there's no divisions. It's just one division, and the two highest winning percentages will play each other in the ACC championship game because they have to add Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is not in a division at this point. How about those non-conference games? Can you explain that? You're allowed one pick, but it has to be played in state. Why is that?
Yeah, for travel purposes, I can only guess that's what it is, to make these bus games as much as possible due to the virus. I'm thinking about Notre Dame, maybe a Purdue. I don't know. The Big Ten is yet to say what they're going to do. Last week when I was writing that story, it looked like the Pac-12 and the Big Ten were going to do something similar with 10 games plus one. What this does, and there's a report out there, Chris, that the SEC is going to go to conference games only. You would think that this would be a natural for Florida and Florida State. But if they go conference games only in the SEC, no South Carolina Clemson, no Florida State, no Louisville Kentucky. So I don't know what they're going to do for those in-state games if the SEC is indeed playing just conference games only.
And the way we're trending, it looks as though the only Power 5 conference that's going to allow its conference teams to play 12 games is the Big 12. Oklahoma has 12 games on the schedule. Iowa State added Ball State yesterday. They have 12 games on the schedule. Do you think the Big 12 is going to be the only conference to play 12 regular season games?
I don't. I think at the end of the day, they'll come to the realization this uniformity is probably best, unless they think it gives them some sort of extra data point for the playoff. But, who can be thinking about a college playoff here in July? They're just trying to get the season in. I know Oklahoma plays Tennessee. That's a big one they'd like to keep on the schedule. Maybe that's their +1 game. But I think now that you've got, these 3 conferences, and certainly it looks like the SEC isn't going to play 12, but this report is true. That would leave the Big 12 out there as the only conference intending to play 12. It would, in one sense, Chris, it would show, how the lack of leadership in all these conferences. They'd be all over the place in games, and we'll see who has the advantage. Right now, the ACC is going with 10.
1 month from today, the first scheduled college football games. Oklahoma just added a game on August the 29th, and the NCAA came out with a blanket waiver saying anybody can schedule for that August 29th date if they want to move a game up or schedule a non-conference there to try to get it in. Do you foresee potentially a non-conference ACC team wanting to put a non-conference game before the start of the conference season there?
I do. I think there's going to be a lot of teams move to August 29th. One, trying to get a game in just to practice this protocol, what it looks like for, just going up to a game week. Try to get it in early. Then you can have a few weeks, maybe in the case of some teams, to get well, quote unquote, after playing that game. I think a lot more teams in FCS and all over the place are going to go to August 29th. Yes, Oklahoma's playing Missouri State. That was moved up a week for all the reasons I mentioned. That was not an added game. They'd already had that game on the schedule as their season opener. But that was moved to August 29th. I tend to think, because of everything I have read and seen and reported about the ACC, they want to start later in September. But I can certainly see the Big Ten doing it, because the Big Ten has been suspiciously quiet about when they're going to play those conference games or the 10+1. I think they want that variety. They want that room to move games around, or they can just sparse games, put games in the middle of September, all over the month of September, and see how it goes. You don't have to play 14 non-conference games in September anymore. You can parse them out. So I do think we'll see more of that on August 29th. That could be a bigger day than we thought.
That is a month from today. We are almost there, and these conferences getting bullish. The ACC says 10 conference games plus 1 non-conference game, an 11-game season in the ACC, and Notre Dame is a part of it. That's Dennis Dodd here on HQ with the very latest. Going to take a 60-second break and come back. The couple of guys who went to an ACC school. Danny Cannell, Bryant McFadden, Florida State alums, with their take. Continuing our breaking news coverage on CBS Sports HQ, the ACC announcing its conference schedule, 10 ACC games, and each team can add 1 non-conference game, but it has to be played in-state. Most notably, Notre Dame is going to be a part of the ACC this football season. The Fighting Irish will play all 10 conference games and will be eligible to play in the ACC championship game and in the Orange Bowl. There will not be 2 separate divisions as we see every year in the ACC. It's going to be 1 conference, and the 2 highest win percentages at the end of the season will match up in the ACC championship game. Clemson is playing Notre Dame in the regular season. We could see them play a rematch in the ACC championship game. Exciting stuff as we finally pigeonhole Notre Dame into a conference. It took a pandemic. We've got Danny Cannell and Bryant McFadden, former Florida State Seminoles. Danny, how you feeling about this?
I'm getting pumped up. I'm trying to hold back, temper my expectations, temper my excitement, because of course we know what's going on right now. But I love the fact that the ACC finally got Notre Dame. This is something Notre Dame has fought for the last 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from everyone, is to stop being independent, to just join. Then when they kind of joined the ACC and all other sports except for football, felt like, all right, we're getting closer. Now we get them to actually play a full ACC schedule. I hope this is the start of something that could be potentially permanent. Of course, Notre Dame might fight that, but I'm hopeful that maybe they like being a part of the ACC and they see what it can bring to them. The other thing is preserving the non-conference games if they're in state. Clearly, this is a message to the SEC, who is deciding as we speak what they want to do. Do they want to do an SEC-only schedule, or will they allow a non-conference? By putting out the news first now, I think it puts some pressure on the SEC to evaluate this, because I think college football needs Florida versus Florida State, Georgia versus Georgia Tech, Louisville versus Kentucky. There's some great rivalries within the ACC and SEC that are out of conference. They need to do everything they can to preserve those if we're going to play a college football season.
Yeah, I second everything you said, Danny. Just being able to get Notre Dame involved is huge. It's huge. I think this is a bigger deal for the ACC than it is for Notre Dame, because we know what they will bring with them. National recognition. College football fans follow Notre Dame. Now, being able to add them into your conference is huge. And then secondly, the next biggest thing that I took away from this news is that everybody is a part of the same division. It's a 10-week schedule. There's no, the Atlantic is gone, the Coastal is gone, everybody is together. So that's a huge, huge plus as well. I love this model. The ACC, they're going to go by this season. This is huge, and I wouldn't have a problem with them if this was permanent, if this was the same schedule going forward after 2020. This is a big, big deal. And then you talk about the non-conference matchup, as long as it is in state. That's huge. Florida State. I mean, being able to get Florida, still have that rivalry intact. You talked about Georgia Tech and Georgia and Kentucky and Louisville. So this is a huge plus for ACC just coming out with this news today. And maybe we can see some of the other Power 5 conferences follow the same criteria, being able to get college football going and seeing big time football week in and week out, especially in the conference. Bravo to the ACC.
The NCAA has come out with a blanket waiver saying that any team, if they want, can play on August the 29th, which is a month from today. Move the season up to what is being called Week 0. There are a couple Big 12 teams that are playing that week, Oklahoma and Kansas. Danny, would you be in favor of Florida State or any of these ACC teams scheduling their one non-conference game for before the start of the conference slate?
I would. I just have to laugh a little bit, Chris, when you say they're granted this waiver from the NCAA. What if they didn't? These teams would still do it anyway. The NCAA holds no weight over what these schools want to do. They're irrelevant. They're trying to showcase them with power. That's a totally different discussion. I mean, especially, well, it depends on what happens with the SEC. If the SEC says, nope, we're only going to go 10, we're not going to go out of conference, then I'm all in favor. Florida State, schedule an FAU, a Florida A&M, a UCF, some other team within the state that you could get a competitive, a game on your slate. So you can kind of get that feel out session. They've got quarterback battles they want to figure out. They're trying to get young players in a new system. So I'm all in favor of these schools. If they can find somebody that essentially would amount to a preseason game and it's a winnable game, I'll take that, assuming they can't get the rivalry games done.
Yeah, it depends on who the matchup is. I mean, if you're able to get a warm-up like game, that would be huge for your program, because remember, most teams did not get a chance to kick off spring football or finish spring football. So there lies the problem of lacking reps with players individually and then getting the chemistry established and not being able to get out on the grass throughout summer. For us, being able to go out and do things on our own during the summer before training camp kicked off was huge when I was at Florida State. But if you're not able to get one of these, less competitive teams to kick off the season, I would say stay put. Don't go out there and jump into the fire not knowing exactly what you have within your team, because pretty much everybody's going to be in a very uncomfortable situation trying to rush to get the game plan in place, the scheme in place, trying to solidify who the starters are. What about some of these universities that have new OCs, new DCs, new head coaches, things like that? That's a lot of turnover you have to worry about, and trying to start week 1 non-conference matchup against a potential powerhouse might not be the way to go. But if you can go get you a team that is considered a warm-up like game, I'm down for it.
ACC is going to play 10 conference games. You can add 1 non-conference game to make it 11 for the season. For years, guys, it seemed like most conferences played 8 conference games. In the last 10 years, you've had some conferences go to 9. Now to 10. I mean, how much more difficult is that going to be physically throughout a season when, you don't have those 3 powder puffs or 2 powder puffs that you normally have, that you are in conference virtually the whole way? Danny?
It's going to be a lot more physical for sure. The level of competition when you're playing Power 5, any conference, if you're Power 5, is going to be slightly better than a Group of 5 opponent. So that's going to be significant challenge for those teams that are going to try to do that out there. So that's one thing that's going to be a challenge. You know who wins though? College football fans. Like we're going to get exceptional matchups every week, because I always go back to that second week in November when there's either buys or there are a bunch of cupcakes, as you mentioned, Chris, and you're like, oh, this is a bad weekend. In theory, if we get there and everybody's playing all these in-conference opponents, you should have marquee matchups every single weekend of the college football weekend. So the college football fans win might be tougher on the teams. You might see some more competitive balance, but man, it should set up for an exciting season.
No question. The fans, I'm excited. I know, Danny, you talked about how excited you were in hearing this news. I'm right there with you because we see quality, big-time football week in and week out. Every game will matter for these players, for these coaches, and there lies who has the pressure. The players have the pressure. The coaches have the pressure. There's already a lot of pressure on these players and these coaches because how abnormal this season has been, off-season has been. But now knowing that every game you will play outside of that one non-conference game is a conference game. You have to stand up and be consistent if you have any playoff aspirations. So no more seeing the Citadel trot out against an ACC team, Louisiana Monroe, Furman, teams like that, FAMU, whoever. No more seeing that this upcoming season. Every game matters, and for us as fans, as analysts, I love it. I'm excited, and I think this should be the way to go. Now, a lot of coaches might not want this because you don't have what we consider an easy week to prepare for an upcoming team, but from the fan standpoint, this should be the way to go.
Get rid of the throwaway games. I love it.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.